Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 full party building guide for Honor Mode. Hope you're all doing well. Today, I'm going to be talking you through what I believe to be the most fun party for Honor Mode. This is the playthrough that I've had the most fun with of any of the playthroughs that I have done. This party will still, of course, be extremely powerful and easily capable of clearing Honor Mode with good tactics and preparation, but the focus here is going to be on having the most enjoyable playthrough, especially if it is your second or third playthrough and you're just looking to have a lot of fun with the game. This is a party that I actually played all the way through, and that I had an absolute blast with. Every fight was tactical, interesting, and fun, and so this is one of my most recommended parties if you are looking to enjoy a playthrough of Baldur's Gate, which is, of course, the point. I should talk briefly about what I think is fun, so that you can decide whether that matches what you're looking for in a fun playthrough. I enjoy having to make interesting tactical decisions every turn, and having to make different actions turn after turn after turn, rather than doing the same thing over and over again. So I like having to have a lot of choice and decision-making trees when I'm engaging in an encounter. This party produces that in spades. It provides a lot of varied and interesting tactical situations that you need to think to get out of, but also gives you a ton of tools to be able to get out of those situations. So if you prefer to just put up the biggest possible damage numbers and just make the same rotation of skills every single turn, this party may not be for you. But if you like to encounter varied and interesting situations and have to think through what is happening, then I can't recommend this party enough. Just as with all of my full party building guides, I have done full build guides to each of these classes, so you can check out those videos, which I'll link in the description, for more in-depth guides to each of these characters. And these builds are all meant to work together. They both are extremely powerful builds in their own right, and they synergize extremely well with one another. What that means is there is no overlap in item requirements, and in fact this party has no specific item requirements, though of course I'll make gear suggestions for each character. You don't need to make any specific story choices in order for this party to function. It works no matter what story decisions you make in the game. And all of these builds are designed to work together, no matter how you want to approach your playthrough. So it should fit with just about any style of play, so long as you're looking to have a good time. Alright, let's get to the builds. For our very first build, we are going to go with the character that produces the wackiest and most awesome moments in all of Baldur's Gate 3. We're going to play the Wild Magic Sorcerer. Wild Magic Sorcerer is one that you rarely see recommended for Honor Mode playthroughs, because of course it produces a lot of randomness, and as I frequently say, the enemy of optimization is randomness. Wild Magic Sorcerer, though, is actually a very good class. It's a very, very powerful class with some extremely strong abilities. Of course, Sorcerers are always extraordinarily powerful, but Wild Magic Sorcerer actually gets some excellent abilities. And the Wild Magic Surges are, on average, very good for the players. Also, once you learn a couple rules of positioning as to where your Wild Magic Sorcerer should be in relation to the enemies and the party, you can minimize a lot of the potential downsides of rolling a bad Wild Magic Surge. The rule here is that you want to keep the Sorcerer 30 feet away from your party members and at least 20 feet away from the enemies. That way, enemies can still receive most of the negative Wild Magic Surges, and allies can not get hit by something like polymorph all of your allies, but you won't have the chance of accidentally giving enemies a very powerful buff. Most of the buffs that the Wild Magic Sorcerer provides are 20-foot radius, most of the negative effects are 30-foot radius. So just by keeping that positioning in mind, you can mitigate most of the downsides of Wild Magic Sorcerer, and it produces awesome and varied situations every single combat. You never know what's going to happen, so you're going to have to solve a lot of really interesting tactical scenarios when you have a Wild Magic Sorcerer on your side, and of course it gives you the tools to do that. If you are not comfortable playing a Wild Magic Sorcerer, you can definitely just substitute this for a different subclass. Either Storm or Draconic Sorcery will still let you play this party build in an extremely fun way, but for those of you who really like some spice, Wild Magic Sorcerer is the way to go. For our cantrip selection here, this is going to be our main spellcasting damage dealer for the party, so we're taking Ray of Frost and Firebolt, both excellent utility cantrips, and this character will also pick up Minor Illusion, because it's useful to have that in every party. You definitely need access to Minor Illusion in the party, and this is the first character that can grab it, so we're going to grab it. Also go ahead and take Mage Hand, because we will potentially be using Mage Hand to throw bottles of water, for example, in particularly challenging fights. So having access to that helps as well. For our spell selection, we're going to go with Chromatic Orb as our level 1 combat spell, and Shield, because things can start going wrong with Wild Magic Sorcerer right away. Shield is really helpful to defend yourself. Wild Magic Sorcerer also gives us access to the Tides of Chaos ability, which is an awesome ability. Very few characters get something this powerful at level 1. You can gain advantage on an attack roll, skill check, or saving throw with this ability. Gaining advantage on an attack roll lets you land a spell more easily because it works on spell attacks. So right away we can use it on Ray of Frost, Firebolt, or Chromatic Orb for easy spell attacks in the early game. And then later game we'll get even more powerful spell attack rolls that Tides of Chaos helps. And gaining advantage on a save lets us not get nuked by a random chance from an enemy, and so it just makes our early game much smoother to have access to Tides of Chaos. It also increases the chance of a Wild Magic Surge from 5% to 50%, which lets us control when we want to trigger a Wild Magic Surge. In some combats, especially ones where you're more or less in control, you may want a Wild Magic Surge, both because it's fun and also because it can give you advantages over your enemies. And in some combats where things are particularly close, you may want to avoid using Tides of Chaos to avoid triggering a Wild Magic Surge. For our ability selection here, we're going to take a very standard spellcaster ability or attribute array of 14 Dexterity, 16 Constitution, 12 Wisdom, and 16 Charisma. This just gives us the most natural attribute selections in the early game. This character will not be our party face, so our skill selection mostly doesn't matter. Although you could make it your party face if this is like your main character and for role-playing reasons you want it to be your party face. So our skill selection mostly doesn't matter on this character unless you're doing that. But might as well pick up the dialogue skills in case you end up having a conversation where this character is leading for whatever reason. That's it for level 1. Let's go to level 2. At level 2, we're going to take another spell selection here, and we're going to pick up Magic Missile. Very important to have Magic Missile on this character. Ignore the ones highlighted in yellow, by the way. That's just because Gale in this playthrough knows some spells from his wizard levels, so those are highlighted in yellow, but we're just taking Magic Missile at level 2. So we have Chromatic Orb, Shield, and Magic Missile as our spells. For our meta magic, we're going to, of course, take Twin Spell. It's very, very important. And we're going to take Distant Spell. Distant Spell is very useful for Wild Magic Sorcerer's positioning, because you have positioning requirements. You need to be 30 feet from your allies, 20 feet from the enemies. Distant Spell lets you still hit the right targets while you're fulfilling those positioning requirements. Sorcerer level 3, we of course grab Quicken Spell, and for our level 2 spell selection, we're going to pick up Cloud of Daggers, and we're not going to replace anything. We still want the 3 level 1 spells that we have. Cloud of Daggers is just the best combat spell at this level by far, so we're going to make sure to pick that up right away. Character level 4, we get a feat, and that feat is going to be Alert. Alert is extremely useful on every honor mode run, especially for this character, because you really need to be going before your allies. If you trigger a Wild Magic Surge, then you usually want to go first with the Wild Magic Sorcerer. I should say this as a tactics thing, because if you trigger a Wild Magic Surge, you want your allies to be able to react to what that Wild Magic Surge was. So very important to win initiative with this character and the whole party, so you can properly react to Wild Magic whenever it comes up. For our spell selection at this level, we're taking Misty Step. Again, this is kind of about mitigating the downsides of the character by being able to run away if things start to go badly, and we've got all of the combat spells that we need at this point. For our cantrip selection, I'm going to recommend that you take Bone Chill, because, again, this is our main combat character. So Bone Chill is very useful against undead enemies, giving them disadvantage on their attack rolls for a turn. And there are some enemies in the game that heal a ton, so Bone Chill is excellent against those enemies. At Sorcerer level 5, we're going to go ahead and pick up Counterspell. Every party should have Counterspell because it's just a mandatory spell. It's amazing for stopping enemies from doing things, and we're going to replace a spell at this point. The spell that we're going to replace is whichever one we're using the least at this point in the game. Probably Chromatic Orb, because Magic Missile will allow us to have more reliable combat effects at this point, and we're going to go ahead and replace that with a higher level combat spell. You have a lot of choices, and it'll kind of depend on how you've developed your other characters and what you're doing exactly at this point in the playthrough. You can pick up Haste. Haste is super powerful because double haste is excellent with twinned haste. But since this character is our main spellcasting damage dealer, I'm going to recommend that we take Lightning Bolt. We have control on our other spellcasters, so getting an enemy wet and then blasting them with Lightning Bolt is a ton of damage, and this character can provide that very easily. And this gives us Cloud of Daggers for sustained damage, Magic Missile for finishing off low health enemies, and Lightning Bolt for blasting enemies if we just need to get their hit points to 0 as quickly as possible. At character level 6, we get Bend Luck, and Bend Luck is another amazing ability. It gives a 1d4 bonus or penalty to attack rolls, saving throws, or skill checks, so you can use it as guidance, or you can use it as cutting words, and it stacks with sources of cutting words. Spoilers, we're also going to have cutting words in this party, so that lets us protect our party from things going wrong extremely easily. If you react with both Bend Luck and cutting words, enemies are taking a massive penalty to their attack rolls. It also lets you land debilitating saving throw effects much more reliably, because you can give them huge penalties to your saving throws. So even if something weird happens, like a Cambion gets spawned by your Wild Magic Surge, you can use Bend Luck to, alongside other debuff sources, to absolutely lock that enemy out of the combat. And it gives you just a ton of optionality to ensure that your combat is going to end in your favor, no matter what situation you find yourself in. The great thing about this party is how many tools we have, and so we want to be able to use those as efficiently as possible. This ability lets us do that. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to pick up Haste. There are definitely some encounters where having twinned haste with a sanctuaried character is going to be the best thing that we can do, and so we will pick up Haste to do that. Of course, you can cast that from scrolls, so you could at this point pick up something like Sleet Storm instead if you want a larger AoE control spell, but Haste on this character is going to be one of the mainstays of its spell casting, so pretty useful to be able to have that just as a spell node. It's also pouring rain here, so if you're hearing a little background noise on the recording, I do apologize. It's just that I'm in the middle of a rainstorm as I'm recording this. So pretend it's the waterfall in the background of the character creation screen, I guess. At level 7, we are going to take our 4th level spell here, and the 4th level spell that we're going to pick up is going to be Ice Storm. This character will be dealing cold and lightning damage, so wet enemies are going to be taking double damage from a lot of its effects with Lightning Bolt and Ice Storm. That's what lets us just blow up enemies, and so it's going to be able to clear out sort of chaff enemies, weaker enemies very easily with all this AoE cold and lightning damage. Ice Storm lets us do that very easily, and is also just a very powerful spell that makes a gigantic ice surface. An alternative is you could take Wall of Fire, if you know that, and you could potentially also replace Cloud of Daggers with Wall of Fire at this point, if you find you aren't using the lower level spell slots as much, or if you rest more frequently. For my playthrough, where I rest pretty infrequently when I play through Baldur's Gate, I want to make sure I have a pretty even split of spells available, so I have options at every level, but depending on how often you rest, you may find that you need different spell selection to take that into account. Sorcerer level 8, we get our second feat, and we're going to take an ability improvement to our charisma. And for our spell selection here, we could either just take Wall of Fire. This is always great to have. It depending on exactly where you are in the game as well. There are some encounters that just get completely solved by Wall of Fire. Any encounter in a narrow corridor or where enemies are having to move towards you, Wall of Fire will solve that encounter immediately. You could also pick up Confusion or Hypnotic Pattern for a large AoE control spell. I'm going to recommend that you pick up Wall of Fire, because we have control spells on our other characters, and so we just want to make sure we have every potential source of damaging spell on this character to make sure that they can kill all of the enemies, because this is, like I said, our main damaging spellcaster. Sorcerer level 9, we get a 5th level spell. We already have pretty good nukes. If you're leaning more into the get enemies wet and then hit them with cold damage strategy, then you could take Cone of Cold. It's a ton of cold damage. Or you could go back for a lower level utility spell at this point, or just another one of the AoE control spells. It's never bad to have things like Sleet Storm or anything along those lines. Greater Invisibility is also useful for this party, but probably this character is still just wanting to nuke enemies as much as possible, so we're going to take Cone of Cold to make sure we have the most possible damage output. At Sorcerer level 10, we gain another Meta Magic, and the Meta Magic that we are going to take is Heightened Spell. Heightened Spell is, I think, often overlooked in Baldur's Gate 3 optimization because Quicken Spell is obviously so ridiculously powerful, but giving enemies disadvantage on a saving throw is ludicrously strong. Heightened Spell lets us lock down enemies with saving throw targeting spells extremely easily, and so any AoE spell that provides a saving throw is going to benefit from Heightened Spell. A Heightened Hypnotic Pattern will guaranteed lock a whole bunch of enemies out of the combat, so that lets you win combats quite easily. Of course, for our cantrip selection here, we are going to pick up True Strike, just to make certain that we annoy people in the YouTube comments. And for our spells, we're going to go ahead and take the AoE control spells. If we haven't picked those up yet, then we want Hold Monster, and we want to replace whatever spell we're no longer casting at this point in the game. For me, it was Cloud of Daggers, but it may be Wall of Fire or something else for you. Could also be Ice Storm at this point in the game. And we're going to go ahead and replace that with one of the other AoE control spells, in this case, Hypnotic Pattern. This gives us the opportunity to lock down enemies with Heightened Spell most easily, and since we can now give enemies disadvantage on the saves against these effects, these control spells are just brutal. So Hold Monster and Hypnotic Pattern let us take even the most dangerous enemies out of the battle. For our 6th level spell selection here, we're going to pick up Globe of Invulnerability. We will get a second source of this, but Globe of Invulnerability is just an incredible spell, and so I want to have access to it on multiple characters, if possible. And we're not going to replace a spell. If you're using a lot of gear that refreshes your spell slots, then you could replace another spell for Chain Lightning at this point. Or just to have fun, you could pick up Eye Bite, which is just a very fun spell to use. But Globe of Invulnerability is just the most important 6th level spell. And again, no matter what goes wrong, we want to have the answer to it. And so Globe of Invulnerability gives us that answer. Sorcerer level 12, of course, we're going to maximize our charisma. And for our final spell selection, we're going to take Chain Lightning so that we have the opportunity to blow stuff up. And again, we're doing lightning and cold damage as a sub-theme of this party and this character, so Chain Lightning works extremely well with that. We don't really need... You can pick up a Scroll of Disintegrate. There is one fight in the game that Disintegrate's very good in. Any fight where an enemy has a very low dexterity saving throw, so keep an eye out for that. But you can use that from a scroll, so you don't need to learn it on your Sorcerer in order to make use of that. Alright, that is our Sorcerer, but of course, let's talk about the gear for this character. For items for this character, there's really only a few stats that we care about. We want to boost our spell save DC and our spell attack rolls to make the maximum use of our saving throw targeting spells, and our spells that deal damage. For that reason, we are going to take anything that boosts our spell save DC, such as the Fistbreaker Helm, or Ketheric's Shield, if you're a race that gives you shield proficiency. This character is also, because some of our other spellcasters are multi-classing, going to be our Scrolls user, and our user of spells that of items that allow us to cast spells. Because it will still be using Charisma for those save DCs. For that reason, this will be your Marka Heshkir character if you're using Marka Heshkir, and you're going to wear items that increase your spell save DC, like the Robe of the Weave and the Fistbreaker Helm. You also want to boost your initiative. While this character has 14 dex and alert, so it's a +7 initiative, it would be great to hit around initiative +10, because that will let you go before just about every enemy in the entire game. So items again like the Fistbreaker Helm that boost your initiative are pretty useful. Special mention to a particular item, the Ring of Feywild Sparks, because this works with your Wild Magic Surges, since you are a Wild Magic Sorcerer, and it's not listed in the description here for inexplicable reasons, but the Ring of Feywild Sparks also gives you a +1 bonus to your spell save DCs. It's unlisted, but it works on any character, but we get to use it here for both of its effects, because we're a Wild Magic Sorcerer, so we can guarantee triggering Wild Magic Surges when we want to. Other than that, you want to boost your armor class, and you want to carry a wide variety of scrolls, because this is going to be your scroll user. For your armor class, also, you will... I used Gale for this playthrough, so I just had him in light armor for most of the playthrough. But if you are a race that doesn't have armor proficiency, you'll want to take Mage Armor as one of your spells, by the way. I should have mentioned that during the spell section. And even then, when you swap to the Robe of the Weave in the endgame, you may want to replace one of your spells with Mage Armor, or collect a big stack of scrolls of Mage Armor, so this character can have higher armor class. Other than that, there's very few item requirements for this character. Just boost your save DCs, boost your initiative, and boost your armor class, and you'll be good to go. For our second character, we're going to be building our Skill Monkey and Party Face, as well as an extremely powerful spellcaster, a Lore Bard. It's no secret that Lore Bard is my favorite character class. It's the class I've played the most. It's the first class I played in Baldur's Gate 3. It's the first class I played in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So I have a tremendous soft spot for this character. But also, it's a character that gives you a ton of options, both in and out of combat, for how you're going to play the game. Lore Bard, I think, is extremely fun just because it lets you do so many cool, different things. No matter what situation you're in, and even if things start to go wrong, cutting words gives you the opportunity to get out of it by causing an enemy to fail a key saving throw or miss a key attack. So it's an awesome spellcaster and defensive party member who can keep the rest of your party alive. For this build, we are going to, as our cantrips, take Friends, and we're going to take Vicious Mockery. We don't need Minor Illusion, because we have it on our other character, and so this lets us have fun by insulting people to death. What would a for fun run be without Vicious Mockery? This will be our main party face, so Friends will be very helpful in some scenarios. Since this is honor mode, you have to be a little careful with when you use it, but you can mitigate the downsides by leaving or disguising yourself. For our spell selection, I'm going to focus on making sure we have some of the most fun out-of-combat utility spells available, as well as our in-combat power. Of course, if you don't really care about engaging with the game's conversations and storyline, then you can swap these in for more combat-oriented spells. But we are still going to take the combat-oriented options of Healing Word and Dissonant Whispers, which are the two best combat spells at level 1 for a bard. Then I'm going to suggest that we take Disguise Self and Speak with Animals. This gives us a ton of conversational utility. Yes, it's true that you can use Speak with Animals potions, but I personally just like the flavor of a bard actually being able to cast it. If you don't care about that at all, then of course you can swap this out for Thunderwave or Tasha's Hideous Laughter, whatever you find most appropriate. Make sure you take the right starting instrument, otherwise you're going to ruin your entire run. And then for our ability selection here, we are going to take 17 Charisma, 10 Wisdom, 16 Constitution, and 14 Dexterity on this character. We take the odd number here because we're going to take the Actor feat, so that's going to let us hit 20 Charisma with 17 starting Charisma. For our skill proficiencies here, I suggest using the Guild Artisan background, because then you get Persuasion and Insight proficiency for your dialogue skills right away. It's not mandatory, but it does help out. And then we're going to take Intimidation, Sleight of Hand, and Stealth. We can actually take Deception and Performance right away, but we're going to get those from the Actor feat, so you'll respec to this skill selection later on. And I just like to take this right away. There are very few Deception or Performance checks in the early game that aren't duplicated by Intimidate or Persuasion checks, so to avoid taking a respec, we can just do this, or you can just respec into the skill selection seen here when you get Actor. That's it for level 1. Let's move on to level 2. And at level 2 with this character, we are going to take a level of Cleric. The reason for this is that we want to have Cleric options on multiple characters in this party, and it boosts our skill selection massively. It also gives us guidance on 2 characters, which is just makes your playthrough that much smoother, and it gives this character heavy armor and shield proficiency, which makes them much more defensively oriented, so it just gives you a lot more optionality for this character if you take a level of Life Cleric. You could just take 12 levels of Lore Bard, that would be totally fine, but I really like the Life Cleric dip on a Lore Bard, so that's what we're doing here. For our cantrip selection, we're going to take Resistance, Guidance, and Thaumaturgy. That gives us... Thaumaturgy is awesome for a party face, because it gives you advantage on intimidation checks. Guidance is just great to have on every character, and Resistance is really nice for some specific dialogue checks that make you make saving throws. And for our domain, our subclass, we're going to take Life Domain, which gives us Bless for free, and increases our healing, so now our healing word will deal more healing, and lets this character use the buff on healing items very effectively, especially in the early game. We are going to go ahead and pick up Religion and Medicine skill proficiencies here, because you can choose between Religion, Medicine, and History. We'll take Religion and Medicine. We just want to take... It doesn't really matter what we take here, and especially if you are playing a Githyanki, you can set your Githyanki skill proficiency to Intelligence, but the Medicine skill proficiency comes up occasionally. And we only get 1 prepared spell at this level. We already know Bless, so our second prepared spell is going to be Sanctuary. This just gives us a bunch of options. We can concentrate on Bless in combat, and then protect our allies with Sanctuary. This party has multiple uses of Sanctuary, multiple uses of Guidance, so a lot of the utility spells we have duplicates of. Character level 3, we're going back to Lore Bard, and we get Song of Rest, we get an additional spell selection, and so here we're going to take Tasha's Hideous Laughter. It's both very funny, and also can lock out an enemy very easily. And at level 4, we get to actually take the College of Lore. This gives us expertise in multiple skills, and also gives us additional skills that we can select from. And, of course, gives us access to Cutting Words. For our skill selection here, we are going to take Expertise in Intimidation and Persuasion, our 2 dialogue skills, and then we're going to go ahead and pick up Perception and Survival, and Animal Handling you can take if you care about it. You can also take Acrobatics to avoid getting shoved, or if you're not a Githyanki, this character was a Githyanki in my playthrough, then you may want to put the Survival selection and the acrobatic selection into more of the intelligence skills to ensure that you can roll those during dialogue checks. So I'm going to say you take Arcana and History, because Arcana, History, Religion will give you a decent skill bonus to those, especially if you use the Headband of Intellect, and then you can pass all the dialogue skills in the game effectively. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to pick up another utility, or we're going to pick up Cloud of Daggers, because we just want a second copy of Cloud of Daggers for combat, and then move on to the next level. At Bard level 4, we're going to take the Actor feat, which gives us +1 Charisma, so we're up to 18 already, and Expertise in both Deception and Performance, so we learn both of those skills and are now an expert in every one of the Charisma skills, which is awesome for passing dialogue checks throughout the game. For our cantrip selection here, we're going to take Blade Ward. This character has heavy armor and shield proficiency, so you can actually front line with this character pretty well. If you walk into the enemy and cast Blade Ward, they won't be able to hit you that often, and you'll take half damage if they do, so that actually lets you draw enemy fire with this character, despite being a relatively squishy bard, much more effectively than you might otherwise think. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to go ahead and take Heat Metal. You can also pick up Hold Person, but I tend to like Heat Metal because it can make enemies actually drop their weapons, which is really powerful in some fights, and it's just a very debilitating spell in general. Notice, by the way, that we haven't taken Longstrider. That's because another party member is going to get Longstrider, and you only need one party member to know it. At Bard level 5, we get Font of Inspiration, so now our Inspiration dice come back on a short rest, and they're improved to 1d8. We also get 3rd level spells, and we're going to take Hypnotic Pattern, that lets us lock enemies out of combats very easily, and we're going to replace one of our lower level spells, in this case probably Tasha's Hideous Laughter, with a higher level combat spell, in this case, Glyph of Warding. This just gives us a great default combat spell that doesn't require concentration, so we can both be concentrating on a powerful spell and also be dealing actual damage or putting enemies to sleep with Glyph of Warding with our 3rd level spell slots. At 6th level Bard, we get access to Magical Secrets. And Magical Secrets is, of course, an amazing ability that lets us dip into spells from across the entire game. We're going to select for our Magical Secrets. There's a lot of options here, so you should have fun with this. I will say that right away. Pick things that you think are going to be fun and cool to have access to. But for this character, I will suggest that you take Counterspell, because having 2 sets of Counterspells in your party just makes it so much less likely that you lose your Honor Mode run to an enemy spellcaster, and Hunger of Hadar. This party's very good at locking enemies in place, so Hunger of Hadar gives us a debilitating effect to trap them in, and that can win you a lot of combats. For our actual spell known here, we can either go back for a lower level spell if you're finding you're running out of 3rd level spell slots, which you may well be because we have a lot of powerful 3rd level spells. You can pick Tasha's back up, you can pick Thunderwave back up, you can grab Invisibility or Enhanceability, or you can take Plant Growth because Plant Growth plus Hunger of Hadar is a pretty powerful effect. But another party member will have that. I'm going to recommend you take Invisibility just because it's a useful spell to know outside of combat, but there's a lot of options at this point, and you'll by now have a better sense of what your party actually needs, depending on sort of your playstyle and how you've been approaching the playthrough. At Bard level 7, we are going to take as our 4th level spell, Confusion, because we want a debilitating AoE spell, and Confusion is the best available at this level. Confusion also works if your party is tied up in melee with the enemies, because it only targets enemies, or you can cast it on enemies who are really far away and maybe they'll hit each other. Confusion is a somewhat situational spell because it's a little bit dangerous, but this party is a little bit about just having fun with some randomness, and Confusion definitely lets you do that. At Bard level 8, we get our 2nd feat, and the feat that we are going to take here is Alert. We're going to boost our charisma other ways with this party member. You'll probably just wear the Birthright hat to get to 20 charisma on this character, and you definitely do not want to go into the end game with only +2 initiative, so this character is going to pick up Alert in order to make sure that we can still go first in combat. It does mean that we have to invest in Alert rather than being able to level our charisma or take a different feat because we took the 1-level Cleric dip, but I think the Cleric dip is definitely worth it. We're going to grab Greater Invisibility. This will help for some utility situations and gives us the option to do some stealth archery with our archer party member, if that's something that we want to do. And at Bard level 9, we are going to pick up as our 5th level spell, again, Hold Monster. Being able to lock down enemies is really good, and Bard doesn't have a lot of amazing options as it's at its 5th level spells, so Hold Monster is the one that's most likely to come up. But of course, the real joy is when we get to Bard level 10, We get expertise in 2 more skills, so we can probably just take stealth and sleight of hand. That lets us make sure that we can still open the endgame locks. You could also have taken expertise in sleight of hand on this character earlier and just take like persuasion and sleight of hand, and that might actually make things a little easier. It's not what I did for this run, but in retrospect, maybe that would have made it easier to open more locks. And then for magical secrets, we are going to pick up Conjure Elemental, an awesome ability for every party, and just gives you a ton of optionality for what you're doing. And then this is going to depend a little bit on sort of how the playthrough has gone up to this point, and whether you're still using the buff on heal item set on this character. If you are, I recommend taking Warden of Vitality. It gives you bonus action healing, so you can pass out bonus action buffs with this character. You could also take Guardian of Faith, a really good spell to know. You could even grab Misty Step, especially if you are not planning to do the Illithid powers in this run. Misty Step is still a very useful positioning tool, even into the late game. Or just one of the excellent crowd control spells available at level 3, like Sleet Storm or Slow, which is good for certain boss fights. But I like the buff on heal set even on into the late game, so I'm going to recommend picking up Warden of Vitality. For our actual 5th level spell, there's not a lot that's really tremendous for us at this point, though you can take Enhanceability for certain late game skill checks. We already have access to this on another party member, but never hurts to have multiples. If you want that party member to be making skill checks while also reacting, you can have Enhanceability on multiple characters. For our cantrip selection, again, we're just going to go ahead and pick up True Strike to annoy people in the YouTube comments. And because, you know, this wouldn't be the most fun party if we didn't have as many True Strikes as possible. Finally, at character level 12, for our spell selection at this level, we are of course going to take Otto's Irresistible Dance, the funniest spell in the entire game, and also lets you lock out even the most dangerous bosses for at least 1 round, because they're guaranteed to fail the first saving throw. It's an irresistible dance, so they always fail the first one, and then they may fail more saves in the future, so this gives you at least 1 turn of being able to beat up dangerous enemies for free. An awesome spell, and of course, extremely funny. You can also, on this character, if you, again, are going to use a lot of spell refresh items or Illithid abilities on this character, you can replace a spell with a higher level spell. You can pick up Eye Bite at this level for increased hilarity, but I'm going to recommend that you just use Autos as your 6th level spell with this bard. Or, of course, a Conjure Elemental summon. For items for this character, there are very few item requirements. You want save DC gear on this character, spell save DC gear, but not as much as your Sorcerer does. So you just put any spell save DC items that your Sorcerer doesn't need onto this character. In the late game, most of your spells don't actually have saving throws associated with them, because you're casting a lot of Hunger of Hadar and Otto's Irresistible Dance and stuff, so your save DCs don't matter that much, and you're going to move towards more of a supporting role in the late game. But, of course, any boosts to that you find and that your other party member doesn't need will be pretty helpful. You do want this character to go very early in combat, so this character is likely to wear the Sentinel Shield in order to boost your initiative as high as possible, and that will let you go before every enemy. This is going to be the initiative item that this character wears, and Ketheric's shield goes on the Sorcerer. And then you probably want the Birthright Hat to boost your charisma up to 20, just to make sure that your charisma is as high as possible. Early game, you can also use the Warped Headband of Intellect to pass some of the intelligence checks, and you may still want to just swap this in for dialogue checks, where you know you're going to have to roll Arcana or History or Religion or something like that on this character. Other than that, there's really very few item requirements for this character. There's just about nothing that you need, though you get heavy armor and shield proficiency, so you're going to be wearing those. I recommend the Dwarven Splint Mail for the mid-game, because +2 to your Constitution means this character will just about never drop concentration on spells. Unlike the Sorcerer, we don't have save proficiency in Constitution, but increasing it by 2 from the Dwarven Splint Mail both gives us more hit points and lets us pass our con saves more reliably. And this character can play up in melee because of your high AC, cutting words, can reduce enemy attacks, and you can cast Blade Ward on yourself, so you can actually draw fire with this character as well. And of course, I forgot to put these in the character's inventory, but this is your buff on heal set wearer for the party. So you need the Hellrider's Pride, which provides Blade Ward to your allies whenever you heal them, and Whispering Promise, which blesses your party whenever you heal them. This character is going to be your healer throughout the game, and so these buff on heal items are extremely important. For character number 3, we're going to go with the newly buffed Nature Cleric. Nature Cleric is my new, favorite cleric domain because it's so much fun to use. You get a lot of cool tools that other clerics don't have, and access to some of the most awesome druid spells that really let you control the battlefield, while not being as overpowered as light or tempest domain clerics, which can often, I find, just kind of ruin the game. So nature domain clerics are really awesome and make an really fun addition to every party. This party also does lack a little bit in terms of melee punch, especially in the early game, and Nature Domain, because you get Shillelagh right from level 1, gives you that, so this character can be right up in the front line, beating down enemies with a club or staff, because you have access to Shillelagh and can make those attacks using your wisdom. For our ability scores for this character, we're going to be able to take the Greedy attribute split, where we take odd numbers in order to maximize 3 stats as much as possible. We're going to go ahead and pick up 16 dexterity for this character. This character is going to be wearing medium armor for a lot of the game, so we want higher dexterity, and we won't be able to take alert until a little bit later. And then 17 wisdom and 15 constitution. You can, of course, take 12 strength and then 14, 16, 16, and then respec to this number once you hit your first ability score selection. I don't think it really matters that much either way. For our cantrips for this character, we're taking a second copy of Guidance, but we have Resistance on our other character, so this character is going to go ahead and pick up Blade Ward and Light to make sure that we have a light source for our party. And then we also get to pick up Shillelagh from our Nature Cleric level, which lets us attack using our Wisdom in melee, so as long as we have a club or a torch, we can bonk enemies with that using our Wisdom. And then for our skill selection for this character, it mostly doesn't matter. We're not doing any dialogue with this character because we already have 2 charisma characters in the party. So what skills we take here mostly will not affect the game. At level 2, we're going to just continue to level up in Cleric. Although I will say that there is another option that you could take with this character, which at this point is to multi-class 1 level into Wizard. That would let you get all of the wizard spells that you can learn from scrolls on this character. In that case, you would want the Headband of Intellect in order to set your intelligence to 17, so you could actually prepare for wizard spells, because right now with only 8 intelligence, you can only prepare 1 wizard spell if you take a level of wizard, but the Headband of Intellect will give you more. That's another option if you just want to experience more of the game. For this playthrough, I just went with a monoclass Cleric, but there's definitely ways to change the way that you are experiencing the game by taking a level of Wizard here. For our prepared spells at low levels, this character also does want Healing Word and Sanctuary, and we want Command, Bless, and Create Water. Create Water is going to let us set up for our Wild Magic Sorcerer to blow things up with lightning. Cleric level 3, we are going to get access to Spike Growth, which is an awesome spell to have at low levels. This will just win fights on its own and gives you a ton of optionality for dealing with various encounters. So that's one of the things I love about Nature Cleric, is that you get to fix 2 of the only weaknesses that Cleric as a class has. Cleric basically has no weaknesses except that it can lack AoE crowd control spells, and it can lack very early game damage. Nature Cleric solves both of those problems by giving you AoE crowd control spells in the form of Spike Growth and then Plant Growth at later levels, and also gives you Shillelagh, so you have excellent early game damage output. So you solve 2 of the only problems that Cleric has as a combat character by taking Nature Cleric. For our prepared spells at this level, we're going to add in Spiritual Weapon. This is just gives you the ability to distract enemies, block doorways, deal a little bit of extra damage. It's cast as a bonus action, so it's awesome for you. Most of the time you're going to be using Spike Growth rather than Spiritual Weapon, but both are very useful to have. Cleric level 4, we're going to take a feat, and we're just going to take an ability improvement to even out our attributes here. You could also take Alert at this level. 16 Dexterity is probably, like a +3 initiative is probably enough, but Alert is never a bad pick in Honor Mode, so definitely worth considering as well. And then for our cantrip selection, it mostly doesn't matter what we're going to take, but you can pick up Produce Flame to have access to a ranged attack. This character mostly doesn't need Produce Flame because we attack using Shillelagh instead, but this is definitely an option. Cleric level 5, we get access to the awesome level 3 Cleric spells, giving us access to Glyph of Warding, Mass Healing Word, and, of course, Spirit Guardians. Spirit Guardians is going to be our mainstay combat spell for the foreseeable future on this character. You just cast it and run around. Enemies take a bunch of damage. Glyph of Warding is good to have multiples of. We already have it on another character, but it just lets us do a bunch of AoE damage, which again we can set up using Create or Destroy Water first beforehand. And Mass Healing Word gives you a solid option if things go wrong. You have a bonus action to get up multiple downed allies and stuff like that. Cleric level 6, we get Dampen Elements, and so this gives us another reaction to save ourselves if things are looking bad. This party has a ton of defensive reactions, and Dampen Elements is another one of them. And so now and especially because Nature Cleric was buffed, so this no longer requires a Channeled Divinity charge. It just halves the damage of any elemental damage you take. Obviously massive against huge bursts of elemental damage, but also just prevents incidental chip damage throughout the game. Lots of enemies deal like a d4 of fire damage here and there, or throw a bomb or something. Dampen Elements just halves all that damage, so it keeps your party much healthier throughout the entire game. Cleric level 7, this character is going to pick up Grasping Vine, which is a surprisingly good spell after the buff, and it doesn't cost a concentration slot, works very well alongside Plant Growth and Spike Growth, which you can trap enemies in. A Grasping Vine pulling enemies into Spike Growth, into Hunger of Hadar, is a pretty dangerous effect, and so you can definitely use this to turn the tides of combat. And then we're going to prepare from this level. Did not want to unprepare Spirit Guardians. That's very important to keep prepared. We're going to prepare Freedom of Movement and Guardian of Faith. Guardian of Faith is a surprisingly excellent damage spell, and Freedom of Movement is a great panic button. If an ally gets stunned, then you can hit them with Freedom of Movement to break them out of the stun. Don't cast this at the beginning of the day, just save it for an emergency. Cleric level 8, we get Divine Strike, and so this character doesn't have extra attack, so it's not a main melee attacker, but it still does do okay melee damage with Shillelagh and a Torture Club plus Divine Strike. That can be a decent amount of melee damage output if you're low on spells, and of course you want to be adjacent to enemies anyways, because you're running Spirit Guardians a lot of the time. So you'll have two main ways of engaging in combat with this party, is either lock enemies down with Spike Growth, Hunger of Hadar, etc., and then pepper them with arrows from afar and kill them before they can do anything to you, or get up close to them and beat them down with this character with Spirit Guardians running, and they can't return damage to you because you have all your defensive reactions. For our feat on this character, again, we're just grabbing Alert. It's Honor Mode, so we still want to go before all of the enemies. Cleric level 9, we are going to go ahead and prepare 5th level spells. There's not a lot of 5th level spells that we actually really want at this level. Like, you can pick up Flame Strike because it's fine, but most 5th level cleric spells are not particularly exciting, so you can go back for something like Banishment, which is really good in some encounters where enemies have low charisma saving throws. Typically, this character, we want to not use too many spells that have saving throws. This is more of a utility caster, because our other two party members want spells that require saving throws. So that's why we're doing a lot of Spirit Guardians, which technically has a saving throw, but does half damage even if they succeed, spike growth, plant growth, etc. that don't really have saving throws associated with them, and then summoning Guardians of Faith and spiritual weapons. Cleric level 10, we get Divine Intervention and another cantrip. We can't take True Strike on this character. I know it's heartbreaking for everyone, so we're just going to go ahead and take, I don't know, Sacred Flame. And then Cleric level 11, we get access to 6th level Cleric spells, and this character, of course, is going to be our Hero's Feast user. If you're not using a Camp Caster, this party definitely does not need to use a Camp Caster, so I'm going to recommend using Hero's Feast. Some character in your party should definitely have Hero's Feast, and this is the character that's most convenient to do it with. Finally, at Cleric level 12, we take our last feat. And the feat that we take is just going to be buffing our wisdom up to 20. Although we're not putting save DC gear on this character, we still have a decent save DC with the spells that require it, and a lot of our spells don't, so increasing our wisdom helps us out. If you find you're losing concentration on your spells a lot in combat, you may want to take Warcaster instead, just to give yourself advantage on concentration spells. Because we have so many ways to stop ourselves from getting hit with Bend Luck and Cutting Words, I wasn't finding that to be a major issue, but of course if you are, there is a feat that can mitigate that, and this character can play just fine with 18 Wisdom, so Warcaster is a totally reasonable alternative if you're finding that you're dropping concentration a lot. 4 items for this character. I ended up having this character be my Radiating Orb and Reverberation character for part of the playthrough. Then I got bored of that slightly overpowered playstyle and swapped out to just sort of a random selection of items that I thought were cool. But for sort of the most optimal way to play this party, you're going to want this character to wear the Radiating Orb gear and the Reverberation gear. Since you're running around with Spirit Guardians on, you can stack Radiating Orbs on enemies using the Luminous Armor, and the Callous Glow Ring and the Coruscation Ring to inflict tons of radiating orbs, and then you also use the Boots of Stormy Clamor and the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, or the Luminous Gloves, in order to stack Reverberation or more Radiating Orb, whichever you want to emphasize more. That will give enemies a massive penalty, because how Radiating Orb works is, for each stack, the enemy gets a -1 penalty to their attack rolls, and so that gives them a massive penalty to their ability to actually hurt you, keeps your more vulnerable party members alive, and sets up tremendous amounts of debuffs on the enemies. An extremely powerful strategy that you're going to see in a lot of Honor Mode runs. I also just ended up swapping to sort of random items on this character later on, because I got a little bit bored of locking down the bosses so much, but that is certainly the most powerful way to do it. In the early game, you're going to want to use a non-magical torch combined with Shillelagh, although you do have to be careful, because when your torch is on fire, you can blow yourself up by walking near explosive barrels or oil or whatever. But that's a ton of additional damage. And then in the late game, you can either use a staff or another club combined with Shillelagh to keep meleeing, although you won't be meleeing as often in the late game, or just carry a utility item like Fular Alluve. It doesn't matter that you're not proficient with it, you can still get the benefit of it. Excuse me, sneeze snuck up on me. Just by walking next to enemies, which is something that this character already wants to do. Another cool option is just to use a mace and drink a strength elixir so that you can just bonk enemies, because that's kind of fun. But the most optimal way to play the character is with Fular and the Radiating Orb gear and the Reverberation gear. In addition to that, I recommend the Adamantine Shield as your third shield for most of this playthrough. These characters are all shield proficient, so you've got Ketherix on one, Sentinel on another, and Adamantine on the third. That makes this character immune to critical hits. This character will be taking a lot of your attacks for the party, so immunity to critical hits is really important. Alright, that's character number 3. Let's go to character number 4. For our 4th character here, we're going to go with my very favorite Martial subclass, and we're going to take a Ranger as our party member. This party does, up to this point, lack a little bit of sustained damage output, and also can run out of resources because we have 3 spellcasters in the party, so if you're taking very long adventuring days, you can run out of resources. This character helps mitigate that by providing amazing sustained damage and also giving you a ton of utility to the party, and just being an overall awesome addition in terms of damage output, while also being really, really fun to play because of the cool tactical options that it gives us. We're going to start with a level of Ranger here, and for our favored enemy selection, we're going to take Bounty Hunter. Ensnaring Strike is a very good early game effect, so having Bounty Hunter gives us the opportunity to hit enemies with Ensnaring Strike with disadvantage. Even with relatively low wisdom, that's still going to be a pretty difficult saving throw for early game enemies to make, and so Ensnaring Strike just ends up being a very good effect on this character. And for our Natural Explorer here, we're going to take Wasteland Wanderer Fire. Fire resistance is really valuable, of course, throughout the entire game, and notably it does stack with Dampen Elements from our Nature Cleric, so you only take 1/4 damage if you are resistant and then get Dampen Elements as well, meaning that you're basically immune to fire damage on this character. For our abilities, this character is also taking the greedy attribute selection, so we're going to take 17 Dexterity and 16 Constitution, and then 15 Wisdom. And for our skill selection here, this is going to be our Perception character, so the only important one that we need to get is making sure that we take Perception. Stealth Proficiency is also very useful if you want to end up doing stealth archery shenanigans with this character later on down the line. Other than that, no decisions to make at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. And at character level 2, we are going to take Ensnaring Strike, and we're going to pick up Longstrider. We need to have Longstrider in our party, and we want to get this right away. This does mean delaying Hunter's Mark for 1 level, but I think Ensnaring Strike in the early game is a little more useful with the disadvantage. If you prefer just having Hunter's Mark for additional damage, then you can definitely take that over Ensnaring Strike at this early level. Of course, for our fighting style here, we're going to take Archery Fighting Style, since this is going to be a ranged character, and that lets us provide ranged Ensnaring Strikes and tons of extremely reliable damage throughout the entire game. Archery Fighting Style, making it easy to hit your shots, is one of the most powerful effects, and one of the reasons to play an archer is that they get Archery Fighting Style, so it's just such a good ability. At level 3 here, we get to take our Ranger subclass, and the Ranger subclass we're going to take is Beastmaster. I love Beastmaster Ranger with the changes they made in Baldur's Gate 3. The Beast Companions are super fun. There's a lot of different options that you can do with them. You can use different ones in different tactical scenarios, and it just gives you a ton of optionality for what you're doing in various combats. So Beastmaster Ranger I just find phenomenally fun to play in Baldur's Gate, and this party is really good at protecting the beast. One of the downsides of Beastmaster Ranger is that the beast can die, but this party has Cutting Words, we have Bend Luck, we have Dampen Elements, we have a lot of ways to keep the beast alive, even if it gets into a weird situation. So we're very good at keeping the beast going, so that we can use Beastmaster Ranger to its maximum effect. For our spell selection here, we're going to take Hunter's Mark, because that gives us a ton of sustained damage, so for fights where we don't want Ensnaring Strike, Hunter's Mark is going to be our concentration of choice. And then at character level 4, we are of course going to take a feat, and that feat is going to be Sharpshooter. We have a lot of ability to increase our chance to hit with various tools from our party members, and also of course we can just hide and stuff like that, so we'll very reliably land our Sharpshooter attacks, and this is where a lot of the damage for the party comes from, so Sharpshooter is awesome. You may wonder if you should take Sharpshooter at level 4. You'll often see the advice to delay Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter until later levels. I sincerely disagree with this advice. I think you should take them right away. You can always turn them off if your chance to hit is really low, but most of the time you do more average damage if you just leave them on all the time, and you do more burst damage, which helps you end fights much sooner. Ranger level 5, we get extra attack, and our beast gets even tougher, which is great. Increasing its armor class is really important for the beast, so we definitely want that. And for our spell selection at this level, we're going to go ahead and we will pick up Spike Growth. And now, since we never want to be concentrating on Ensnaring Strike, because it's either going to be Spike Growth or Hunter's Mark that we're spending concentration on, we're just going to go ahead and swap that out, and we will pick up Enhanced Leap. Enhanced Leap gives you a lot of additional mobility. It's another ritual spell, so if you cast it not in turn-based mode, it doesn't cost a spell slot, so you can cast it ahead of time to give all of your party members quite a bit of additional jump distance. Having 2 copies of Spike Growth is really good, by the way, because it lets you cover the whole arena in spikes, and then you can lock those enemies into a Hunger of Hadar even more easily. Character level 6, we get a Favored Enemy and a Natural Explorer, and you could respec to get rid of Bounty Hunter since we no longer have Ensnaring Strike at this point, but honestly, it's not that important. The Favored Enemies are really just for flavor. So you don't particularly need to care about which ones you're selecting. Bounty Hunter and Ranger Knight are the 2 that actually give you mechanical bonuses in the early game. Ranger Knight lets us equip the Grimskull Helmet in order to gain critical hit immunity, which is pretty nice for this character. Bounty Hunter gives us the Ensnaring Strike thing. The others give you basically no real benefit, so we can just take whichever ones we want. Picking up Ranger Knight because gaining crit immunity on this character is actually pretty useful. So while we probably won't have the Grimskull Helmet equipped for most of the game, there may be parts of the game where we want it, and the heavy armor proficiency that we get from this lets us use that item. Natural Explorer here, we're going to take Wasteland Wanderer Cold. That's the second most common type of damage here, and these damage resistances are awesome. This character will have tons of mobility and high armor class, so being resistant to elemental damage that we can then reduce even further with Dampen Elements means that this character is just going to be completely immune to elemental damage throughout the game. Character level 7. Our companion can now dash, disengage, and help as a bonus action. That gives it a ton of mobility around the battlefield and just makes it a much more useful character, as well as, of course, we're getting empowered companions as we level up. It's not listed in the level up screen, but your companions do get qualitatively stronger as well as you level them up. They get new abilities and new cool stuff frequently throughout your levels of Beastmaster Ranger. We're going to take Silence. We don't have a copy of Silence yet in this party. This is another ritual spell that can let us lock down enemy spellcasters. And if you combine that with one of our many ways to render enemies unable to escape us, then Silence is going to keep them from casting spells for the entire fight. And at Ranger level 8, we're now immune to our own spike and plant growths. That gives this character a lot more mobility around the battlefield, which is really gives you a lot of tactical options. I think that that's one of the most fun things that we can be doing is like forcing enemies to come through our own spike growth to get to us, because it really lets you play around with the tactics and mechanics of the game. Landstride difficult terrain is just such a fun ability to have on any character. For our feat selection here, we're going to take an ability improvement and even these out. And then at Ranger level 9, we get to take a 3rd level spell. We can grab another copy of Plant Growth. We can also take Protection from Energy just to have this for an encounter where we might need it. You can take Lesser Restoration. Honestly, I just like having a 2nd copy of Plant Growth. This is a non-concentration way to just block down huge groups of enemies. So with Plant Growths and Spike Growths all over the battlefield, Hunger of Hadar from our Lore Bard, Glyphs of Warding everywhere, enemies will have very few options to move around. And that's really fun to me, so I just like being able to lock down enemies like that. Character level 10, we get another favored enemy. You can pick this based on flavor. Protection from evil and good is the most likely to come up, probably, but of course we're going to take Mage Breaker so that we have True Strike on this character as well. And then for our Natural Explorer selection, we're going to take Wasteland Wanderer for Poison to give ourselves resistance to yet another element. Finally, at Ranger level 11, we get extra attack on our beast for even more sustained damage. This character doesn't have the burst damage or the capstone of the Hunter Ranger, but the level 11 beasts give you a lot of awesome options. And Bestial Fury means that you're making 4 attacks per round on this character just by default before anything else, because you have 2 beast attacks and 2 bow attacks, and then alongside haste or any other sources of increased attacks, you're dealing a ton of damage with this character. Our spell at this level mostly doesn't matter. You can take Pass Without Trace if you want to do stealth archery shenanigans. You have greater invisibility and Pass Without Trace, so you can set that up to allow this character to make a ton of stealth attacks without ever being caught. And then finally, at Ranger level 12, we're going to go ahead and max out our dexterity to make sure that we deal the most possible damage with the highest possible accuracy. For items for this character, you're really just looking to increase your damage output. This character has decent initiative, so you do want small bonuses to initiative, but a lot of the items that we want anyways come with those, so you don't really need to prioritize initiative gear particularly. But the main thing that we need is just ways to increase our damage. Obviously, we're going to want a good weapon, a good bow, and in the early game, that's going to be the Titan String bow combined with an Elixir of Strength, and in the late game, that's going to be the Dead Shot to give us more accuracy and more chance of critically hitting. In addition to that, this character can use both any weapon with a passive effect that increases your damage output on your archery attacks, like the Knife of the Undermountain King. The Organ Rearranger passive still works on your ranged attacks when you have this equipped as a melee weapon, so you can just make ranged attacks and benefit from the bonus to critical hit chance. You can also just use any shield on this character to increase your armor class. You could also dual wield weapons with good offensive passives, but I actually like having a shield on this character because this character is your safety valve if things go wrong, and they still can because we still have a wild magic sorcerer. So despite having optimized builds, things can start to go wrong. If things do start to go wrong, this is your character that gets out of there. So having high armor class and good mobility on this character is pretty useful. You can sacrifice your animal companion's life to distract your enemies while you run away, and then just reset and come back to the fight if things are going terribly wrong. Always good to have that option on a character, so giving them high armor class so they remain high health and unlikely to be targeted by enemies, I find more useful overall than slightly increased damage output. In addition, this character doesn't naturally get Misty Step, so we definitely want some way to give them Misty Step, like the amulet, and we want one of the armors that gives them uncapped armor class, one of the medium armors that gives them uncapped dexterity bonus to their armor class, like the Armor of Agility. That's going to give you 24 base AC with just a shield and the Armor of Agility and 20 dex. And then we've got +1 here because I have the Evasive Shoes equipped as well. But you can get your AC up easily into the into the high 20s with any other gear that increases your armor class. But mostly we're looking for gear that increases our hit chance and our damage, like the Helldusk Gloves, which deal a ton of additional damage on every attack. This character is our main source of damage, so just items that increase our damage are excellent. Special shout out to a couple specific items. The Strange Conduit Ring works all the time on this character. You're concentrating on spells 100% of the time, so you'll benefit from the 1d4 extra damage all the time. And the Snowburst Ring, combined with the Drakethroat Glaive to enchant your bow with ice damage, lets you set up ice surfaces under every enemy that you shoot, which is really awesome. That can just cover the whole battlefield in ice and cause enemies to fall over much more frequently. Finally, of course, you want a big stockpile of the special arrows so that you can use those when they are appropriate. And because we're a Beastmaster Ranger, you likely want some way to become immune to blind, like the Eversight Ring or one of the other items that provides blind immunity, because the high-level Beastmaster Beast can be the Dire Raven, which, when summoned, allows you to produce... Let me actually show you, rather than just talking about it. The Corvus companion, when summoned, has the Fly ability that just uses movement speed and creates darkness wherever it lands. So you can use this multiple times per turn to cover the battlefield in darkness. This party can have a huge darkness sub-theme. So if your characters are immune to darkness, then you can fly all over the place, cover the battlefield in darkness, cause enemies to be unable to attack you, unable to unable to attack you with ranged attacks, or just blind them with no saving throw. You also, of course, this companion is flying, so it's immune to all of the ground surface effects like spike growth and plant growth that this party makes extensive use of. That's it for items for this character, but I should also talk a little bit about how this party plays out in combat. There's two basic strategies for this party to use in combat. Either you are going to engage enemies in melee with your Nature Cleric character to lock them down with debuffs and keep them focused on that character, prevent them from attacking back with all of your reactions, and then slowly burn them down with damage output both from your melee character, from Spirit Guardians, from spells from your wizard, and from archery shots from this character. Or you're going to set up a big AoE microwave combination where you put down Spike Growth, you put down Hunger of Hadar, you put down Darkness, you put down Hypnotic Pattern, you put down Glyph of Warding on top of a big group of enemies, preventing them from doing anything and letting them slowly just burn out to the AoE damage from Hunger of Hadar and from Spike Growth. Every time they move, they'll take damage at the start of each of their turns. Wall of Fire adds additional damage to that. So those are the two basic play patterns for the party. You will also use your summons and your beast to block enemies into those areas. An ideal scenario is if you have like a small room with a doorway through it, and then you can set up a line, like let's imagine across that the enemies were in this little room, or in this area of the inn here. You could set up your summons and your party members across this doorway and then fill this whole area with Wall of Fire, with Spike Growth, with Hunger of Hadar, etc. And then enemies would just be stuck in there, slowly getting DPS down. So those are the two basic play patterns for the party, either giant AoE combos that lock enemies in place and slowly damage them to death, and of course you shoot them with your archer as well, or tying them up in melee combat and burning them down quicker. And of course, the third option is if you really need an enemy dead, you cast Create Water on them with the Nature Cleric, and then blow them up with lightning damage from the Wild Magic Sorcerer, because you can still just one-shot enemies with big bursts of damage. This is a slower party in terms of number of turns it takes to kill enemies than a lot of Honor Mode parties, but that's part of what makes it so fun, is that you actually get to play multiple turns of each combat, so you have to react to what the enemies are doing, rather than just killing them right away with huge one-shot burst combos that stop you from actually having to engage with the game. So that's what I find so much fun about this party. The tactical options are really interesting. The number of options you have available are interesting, and the number of scenarios that you will face throughout the adventuring day are extremely varied and different, both because the enemies actually get to do their thing a little bit, not a ton, we still mostly stop them from hurting us, but they do get to show you their cool tricks, and because the Wild Magic Sorcerer can make all kinds of wacky scenarios happen. Alright, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed this look at this my pick for the most fun party in Baldur's Gate 3. Highly recommended as a run if you enjoy thinking through tactical situations and having wacky scenarios happen. And also just funny Otto's irresistible dance, Tasha's hideous laughter, and vicious mockery moments, which this game is amazing at making just hilarious every time. Of course, if you have enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out with the algorithm, so anytime you engage with somebody's videos, it definitely helps them out, so I do appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.